Now, the oldest victim of the post office scandal says she's disgusted with the delays to compensation. 91-year-old Betty Brown ploughed tens of thousands of pounds into the post office she ran with her late husband Oswald, and says she was eventually forced out of her business by a manager.
Well, meanwhile, the inquiry's heard a Fujitsu manager called former sub-postmaster Lee Castleton a nasty chap ahead of a legal battle that left him bankrupt. Lee's story featured heavily in the ITV drama, which showed the post office taking him to court, where he was ordered to repay a shortfall of £25,000. Well, Lee and Betty join us now, along with Betty's local MP, Richard Holden. Good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. Now, Betty, you have been through such a time with all of this, haven't you? How would you sum up the impact it's had on your life?
Oh, it just totally destroyed your life. Totally. From being a happy person to someone who was absolutely worried sick and devastated. It took everything away and spoiled everything.
It's just so awful. And I know if you take us back to that very first time when you switched on the Horizon system, early on there were shortfalls, weren't there?
Oh, yes, there were shortfalls every week. There were shortfalls of 1,500 at least. And you were told that you had to pay this in immediately. And if you didn't pay it in, you would be sacked. So you had no option. It was your mistake, and you were the only person making mistakes. And I was too old to be in the job. It was time that I had to retire and got out because they wanted new blood in the office who understood technology, and I was far too old for that. So they were going to change everything.
And Betty, do you know how much money in total you put in? Because I know you kept making up shortfall after shortfall, didn't you?
Well, the post office are divided into different sections, but between every section, taking everything into consideration, it was over £100,000.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, Betty, it's just horrendous. The more detail we hear.
That was our life savings that we had, my husband and I had worked all our lives for.
We're just looking at a picture of you and Oswald there, and you can see, you know, what a fabulous couple you clearly were. But, you know, he served his country in World War II and then spent those final years of his life being hounded out of a business that you both loved by the post office. How was he affected by the ordeal, Betty?
Well, you were totally destroyed. You just had to get on with it. You had to bear up. And you got courage from the kindness of your customers. They were very, very nice, kind people in Anfield Plain. And all the support there was from them and support I had from my family. And we just had to say, well, you know, we've got to get on with it and do what we can. But to know that the post office were deliberately doing this is absolutely appalling. Absolutely appalling. Every week I had an arrangement, a standing arrangement with my manager that I would phone at 8:30 every Thursday morning to tell them the result of my balance. There was no question of cover-up. There was no question of trying to hide anything or steal anything. And this is what they kept saying to me. They kept on saying, we know you're not stealing it. We know that you're not. We know that you're putting the money in every week. And we know that you're not falsifying the accounts. But we just don't know where the money's going. Now, when they knew that, they had a responsibility to start there and find out where this was happening, instead of hounding me and tell me you're the only one and you're the worst office in the UK. There's a big office down in London. They have a blackboard up on the wall and the 10 worst offices in the UK are listed on it. And now you're either the second or the third one. I can't remember which one, but you're second or third. So how does that make you feel, Betty, eh? That's how bad you are.
God, Betty, it makes my blood boil to hear that they were just trying to shame you as well when it was their mistake. We'll come back to you in just a moment, if we may. because we've got Lee in the studio here. Lee, the more of you that we get to meet, the more details that we get to hear, we think it can't get any worse. And then you hear what Betty went through, and Oswald, who got ill and died, not having to understand that they finally owned up. Even you going through this, that must upset you enormously.
Absolutely, God. The people's lives destroyed in this. The 555 altogether, the stories are absolutely atrocious, and people did this to people. This is started by a computer program, but the actual events take place between people to people. And this is the underpinning of all of this, the lack of humanity, the lack of understanding.
The thing that I find so frustrating, it feels so calculated as well for all of you. As Betty was saying, you were being told that you were the only one. Someone somewhere had created a script for that helpline call centre whereby they went, if someone says to them, you say they are the only one. That is so calculated and evil.
In the first meeting in Fenny Compton in 2009, when we all sat down, nobody had even spoken about the fact that we were being told that we were the only one. But it became a theme, a common theme through the conversations, that it was such a uplifting event to actually meet another only one. And that became, you know, the whole group had been told it. 555 people have all been told this same thing. And then you find that it must have been scripted and it must have been a business decision to do that.
And you were crying out for help, because I know you called the helpline about, I don't know, over 90 times, didn't you?
Absolutely, yeah.
To desperately try and get help, to try and resolve this.
Absolutely.
How do you feel now when this Fujitsu manager has come out, has called you a nasty chap in an email, urging a colleague to be strong in court?
I would say I've never met him. I've never spoken to him. I've never even spoken to anybody at Fujitsu, not directly. And I think it's just a means to an end. It's just so easy for people to justify their actions being as bad as they are by making out that the person that's receiving the punishment is worse. And it just makes everything easier in their own consciousness, really.
Yeah, so you're going to be at the inquiry today. There is more to come out on this, and, you know, there is still the question of the outstanding payments. Let's go over to Betty's local MP, Richard Holden, who's sat there beside her. Good morning to you. Thank you for being a part of this as well, because I know you've been supporting Betty. But, you know, there is a big question, isn't there, why it's taken this long to get this resolved, the number of victims who are still waiting for payments, and why it's taken an ITV drama for the government to take action on this and to push this through, to try to make sure that people do receive the money they're owed?
Well, Betty and I first met back in 2020 when I heard the story that you've heard today from her. And we've seen the public inquiry set up. That was set up a few years ago now, and it's going to hopefully report by the end of the year and really attribute a responsibility to the people involved. Obviously, we can't prejudge that, but it's quite clear that Fujitsu have already noted that they've had a really big role in all of that. Betty has finally had some interim compensation in the last year and a half, but she's still waiting for that final settlement, because it wasn't just the money that she put into it that she lost, it was also the value of that company that her and her husband had built up over decades, which they were forced to sell short as well. And I think with those 3 compensation schemes now available, the £600,000 for anybody who was wrongly imprisoned, a minimum of £75,000 for anyone who was only slightly affected, but that proper, a bigger compensation scheme with those interim payments that have already been made to people like Betty, I think we're moving in the right direction. What I want to see, though, is people like Betty who've had trauma on this, real trauma, for over a decade, well over a decade now.
Yeah.
I want to see those final settlements in there as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. Betty, will anything make up for what you've been through there? Any amount of money? Because from what you're saying, it just had such a devastating impact on your life, on your husband's life.
Yeah, and you know, they could keep the money, they could stuff it. I would rather have my husband here. And they have deprived us of our lives.
Betty, how would you like to see those responsible held to account? What does justice look like to you?
I would like them to go through what I've gone through for 21 years and 2 years before that, since the year 2000 to put it in, to now is 23 years. And I would like to see them stripped of all the big bonuses that they took, all the large salaries they took, all the fancy 2 million homes they've got, and given to sub-postmasters, and do something for it, because I don't know what they were doing to try and get all that money and do... What have they done with it? They've run an organisation into the ground. They've done nothing for the post office. If I had been sitting in that chair, I would have been up at the banks, all the financial institutions, kicking their doors in and saying, here, we've got a system here. We have terminals that can do your business. We can take your bills, we can take your payments, we can give payments. We can do this, we can do everything that you do. We can save you thousands of pounds. You wouldn't have to buy the terminals. You wouldn't have to maintain them.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to buy all the ink or paper. And we could do all your business. Expand the post office. Not what they did, close them down just because of whim of a manager coming out that she didn't think didn't like what you were doing at that point in time. No. They should have expanded. They should have seen results for the bonuses and the profits. We haven't seen any results or anything from the profits.
Oh, Betty,
They're a disgrace to the country.
Do you know, we're getting inundated with people supporting you. Go Betty Brown, amazing force of nature. We could do with you running a few more businesses in this country right now, that's for sure. That sort of spirit. I'm so sorry. We're all absolutely devastated you have gone through what you've gone through, and Lee as well, for you. But you know that you've got the country behind you now, and we all want this to be sorted out fairly.
I know for you it has a huge impact on your family life, being declared bankrupt. It was a big impact. Thank you for joining us this morning.
And Betty and Richard, thank you very much for your time.